Our next hymn is number 435, Blessed Assurance. This is one I think everybody knows, so I hope that you will all sing. Would you please stand in body or spirit? And now I'd like to call up Ken and his crew for our moment in mission.
Good morning, First Mennonite Church. Good morning. My name is Ken Major, and I come before you this morning as a member of the Faith in Action Commission, serving in the capacity of a volunteer with the Crooked Creek Food Pantry. For many years, FMC supported the Fay Bicard Glick Neighborhood Center. As you may know, the center temporarily closed its doors on August 15th of last year due to financial challenges. It was around that time that the late Bob Wilson encouraged me to help establish a connection with the Crooked Creek Food Pantry and explore how FMC could continue serving the community in a meaningful way. As a result, this partnership between First Mennonite Church and the pantry was established. It is still a relatively new relationship, less than a year old, but already impactful. Let me share a few facts about the food pantry. It is the fourth largest pantry in the Indianapolis area. It opened its doors February of 2015. Currently, the food pantry serves over 5,500 plus families each month. This brings us to how we as a church family can continue supporting this important mission of addressing food insecurity in our community. How you can help. 1, volunteer your time. The pantry needs more than 150 volunteers each week. Consider stepping in and making a difference. 2, donate food. On the first Sunday of each month, FMC collects non-perishable food items. Let's continue this tradition of generosity. 3, give financially. Monetary donations are always welcome. You can visit the Crooked Creek Food Pantry website for more information. 4, encourage others. Support and uplift fellow FMC members who are already volunteering consistently each week. Together, we have an opportunity to continue being a light in our community, meeting real needs, and making a real impact. I appreciate you giving me this time to share with you this morning, and I believe Stan Miller has some words he would like to share about his experiences as well. Thank you.
Sandy and I started volunteering with Crooked Creek last August, soon after Ken announced our relationship with the food pantry. And we received, at the beginning, 2 common questions over and over again from the volunteers. First question was, are you from St. Luke's Church? I guess Sandy looks like a Methodist. But truth be told, a group from St. Luke's started this food pantry some 10 or so years ago. And the bulk of the volunteers today are from St. Luke. So it was a valid question. The second question we got was, where is First Mennonite Church? Well, that gave us an opportunity to talk about FMC. I mean, we're basically 2 miles straight south of the food pantry. The food pantry is super organized. As Ken said, it takes 150 volunteers a week to fulfill their mission. They never have enough volunteers. You can choose, if you're so inclined, you can choose a shift that fits into your schedule. Your niche doesn't have to match the same time and day next week. You can make it very flexible. There are all kinds of tasks, inside, outside, on your feet, sitting down, packing food, directing traffic. One task is equally important as the next task. It brings to me the image of rivulets of water trickling from various locations and coming together to form a mighty river. And so these tasks culminate in these these carts full of groceries and fresh produce. I leave that gig, always my spirit is lifted because I've been able to hang out with people who have donated their time and their talent to, in a little way, alleviate food insecurity in our city. And so I am always inspired when I leave that parking lot. All I'd say is come be inspired along with the rest of us.
Our scripture reading for today is short and sweet. There was rumor in the meeting this morning that there could have been 3 chapters in Genesis that I'd be reading, but 2 short verses, but so relevant for today. So please listen. The first one is from Genesis 50, verse 20. You planned something bad for me, but God produced something good from it in order to save the lives of many people, just as he's doing today. And from Exodus 23:9, don't oppress an immigrant. You know what it's like to be an immigrant because you were immigrants in the land of Egypt.
First Mennonite Church, good morning. Good morning. Buenos dias. Buenos dias. Bonjour. Bonjour. Mbote. I like the children's talk. Margot is my type of girl. Margot and I, we have something in common. It's good to be here this morning for you all here in the building and those following online. It's a privilege to stand up here and share the story of resilience, the story of human and God. And perhaps my story this morning is not precisely Ndunge, resilience and God, but the story of those I stand on the shoulders of. If you have your bulletin, you will see that there's an old man carrying a young person on their shoulders. We are all here this morning, perhaps those little boys or little girl, little human being sitting on the shoulders of a man, a female, a human being who has been there when times were hard. Those who went ahead and lived life uncertain way so that you and I can be here. Join me in prayer. God, this morning we thank you that you have made it possible that we can be here. I'm standing here not knowing all, but I pray that God, the word of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be pleasing to you, our God and our rock. In Christ Jesus' name, amen. We hear sentences like, don't talk to strangers, right? Parent cautioning their children, don't talk to strangers. Or we ourselves have heard parents telling us, don't talk to strangers. There's an African proverb that says that a stranger is a sibling you haven't discovered yet. A stranger is a sibling you haven't discovered yet. Because by the time you get to know them and know their story, you may be surprised and say, wow. The picture we have there, thanks Maggie for putting it there. I was trying as much as possible to tell the story of my grandfather. My grandfather, who is the first generation Mennonite, or was the first person to be a Mennonite in my family. His name was Mazela Noah. Mazela is the last name and Noah is the first name. That's how we do it in the Belgium colonial land. They will put always the last name first, so I will be Sefu Ndunge instead of Ndunge Sefu. My grandfather was a slave into the place where he lived, into the place where I find my root. A mission station called Mukedi. That is a Mennonite mission station which was formed in around 1922. My grandfather came there not by choice. He came there not because he was seeking for some green pastures, as many have left their places to go. But my grandfather went to that place, to that region, because of slavery. He went there because another man of that region called the name I bear today. I will be the third person in my family to have the name of Ndunge. My great-great-grandfather was Ndunge. That means my mother's great-grandfather. He was a notable man who lived in the Mukedi area, in the Lozo area, and because of the lack of men in his family, he will go and buy slaves and bring them to his family. He will buy grown-up people to serve him, but he will buy young people to become part of his family. So my grandfather, Mazela Noah, was purchased as a slave when he was around 5 or 7 years old. Before I continue, I want to ask a question. When you see an immigrant, when you see a person who doesn't look like you, who doesn't speak a language you know, when you see a person who looks strange, how do you react? What comes first in your mind? Now keep that question at the back there. We will come back to it. My great-great-grandfather went and purchased a man in the area which is today's Angola, northern Angola, and brought him to the Pende regions where the southwestern area of the Congo is, and where the Mennonite happened to go make and plant a mission station. My grandfather got there, didn't speak any language of that area. My grandfather went there, didn't know the people, the culture, but he happened to be in the house of Ndunge, my great-great-grandfather. And Ndunge chose not to use this young man as a slave. He said, "This one will be my son." He treated my grandfather as a son and instructed his own son, Mupese, who is my mother's grandfather. He instructed his son to have Mazela Noah become his own son. And so my great-great-grandfather will leave my grandfather to the care of my great-grandfather. Does that make sense this morning? I want to put the picture clear. There's a person called Ndunge. There was a person called Ndunge. That is my mother's great-grandfather. Then there was a person called Mupese. That is my mother's great-grandfather. Then my grandfather, the person I tried to put there, is Mazela Noah, the slave guy. Story of slavery didn't start just in my family. It went back then. We read this story. We're reading this story in Genesis. The story of my grandfather is similar to the story of Joseph, where people selling you because you seem to be a problem in the family. Perhaps my grandfather was sold because they didn't find that he will make sense in them. Those days, the Lunda people where my grandfather came from, they were keeping the best in their home and selling the useless one. And the useless one went to an area where he was considered to become a son. Joseph was sold because of jealousy. His brothers thought this one is too much of himself. He's dreaming. He's telling us that we will worship him. For any reason that a humankind consider the other person a nuisance, that a humankind consider the other one as a problem, God may be seeing an opportunity. God may be having in that person a destiny. Joseph was not spared from suffering when he was sold. In Potiphar's house, he was unjustly accused. In prison, he was forgotten by those he helped. Years of silence, faithfulness without anyone taking notice, without God seeming to intervene. At least that is what our human eyes could have perceived. Years of silence went while Joseph was away. My grandfathers too experienced those years of silence. Can you imagine a 7 years old at the age of starting primary school being taken away to a place where you don't know the people? Years of silence. We do not know everything that my grandfather experienced in my great-great-great-grandfather or in my great-grandfather's house. We do not know how many mornings he woke up remembering his Lunda's family, where he came from. How many evenings he may have wept in silence. But what we do know is that in that darkness, he remained there. In that darkness, God was there. And my grandfather waited, and God was at work. My brothers and sisters, siblings in Christ, there are seasons in our lives when God seems to be absent. Season when our prayers seem to bounce off the ceilings. Season when we have been waiting for so long that we begin to wonder if God has forgotten us. Like my grandfather, perhaps wondered, God, where are you? Why must I find myself here? Like Joseph in Egypt. But God is always there. Joseph in prison and my grandfather in servitude, their stories teach us the same truth. God never abandoned those who belong to him. He is at work even in the darkness. Indeed, God is at work, especially in the moment of darkness. Strangers they were, strangers in people's eyes. Immigrants they were, prisoners and slaves they were, both Joseph and Mazela Noah. Perhaps like those we meet in our morning walks in the streets where we are. Perhaps those who come and speak different languages. Perhaps those we see in the midst of in the buses who don't seem to know anything around our realities here. God sees them. You see, when we reject or when we send someone away because of some reasons, God may have a purpose, as said earlier. My grandfather, when he left his land, he didn't know what life will be like. But in around 1920, from Upese's house, from my great-grandfather's house, they will look at him now, a young man growing, and they send him to go help the Belgium colony. I will suspect that the colonial master didn't ask nicely. They were going to villages and pick up kids to go help them. And so my grandfather will find himself in the hands of the Belgium colonial masters who were at that time in the Congo, Belgium Congo. And a couple years later, the colonial masters will be asked nicely by the Mennonite missionaries who arrived there and needed some laborers to clear the area, so they wanted to build a Mennonite mission station. The slave boy, the slave young man will now be handed to the Mennonite missionaries. ordinary people who left their homes in the comfortable United States and Canada, went into the green bush of the Congo, carrying a word they have received themselves from a chain of people who were themselves displaced. These Mennonites I'm talking here, many of them will tell the stories of their ancestors who suffered the displacement from Central Europe to Russia and perhaps to this continent here. That's the story at least they told us. That many of them also were immigrants, and going as missionaries to the Congo was in some way giving back, saying thank you to what God has blessed them with. And so through these missionaries, my grandfather will find a job of being a gardener. My grandfather will become a cook. I suspect he was a very nice guy, although he didn't have an education. Those Mennonite missionaries helped him build his house next to their mission stations. Now, in those days, the colonial politics was dictating that white people cannot live in the same area with black people. So our mission stations will be, you have the missionary's house, you have the school, the church, the hospital, and then there will be a little bush, and then you will have where the black people are living. And the church will unite them all on Sundays. And if the missionaries needed something to do among the natives, they will cross the bush and then go there. My grandfather was not in that section where the others were, the natives. Perhaps the missionaries also noticed that this person is not a native. He spoke differently. His accent was different, so they made him live closer to them. I hope someday I will go back there and try to restore my grandfather's house. Joseph, the same way, find favor through Potiphar, going from prisoner to become the prime minister of Egypt. You see, friend, when God has a destiny of a generation, whatever human being can intend to harm, God can turn it to a blessing. My grandfather was vulnerable. He couldn't defend himself, but God sent people to come and defend him. God sent people from another continent to come and help him build a family. Now here comes God's sense of humor. Mazela, my grandfather, is in this mission station. He has arrived at the point where he needs to be married. In those days, missionaries were like also parents to the native people. They will tell you sometimes who to get married with. So the missionaries were in the mission station. My grandmother was sent there because her father was a royal person in the village. So he sent his daughter to go and become and learn something from the missionaries, to learn how to make clothing. And the missionaries thought that this woman, this young lady, was suitable to Mazela, who is my grandfather. Not knowing that my grandmother came from the same house of where my grandfather grew up, or of his masters. And so they married them at the mission station. Now, when the missionary told you as a young man, this is your wife, you go for it. Because God have instructed them. So my grandfather married almost his sister or his cousin, because they grew up. When he was brought as a slave, he was in that same house where this young lady came. In God's sense of humor, God blessed them with 8 children, one of them, the last born, my mother. What I want to tell as a story this morning is, people who come into our cities, people who come into our areas, in whichever form they have come, let's try and show kindness. Let's try and be the feet and the hands of God toward them. Imagine my great-great-grandfather treated my grandfather as a slave. Imagine the missionaries who saw him just treated him as a regular guy like anyone else out there. I wouldn't be standing here for you. Imagine Joseph's masters, Potiphar in Egypt, held back that kindness towards Joseph. Then the entire family of Jacob wouldn't benefit of that food when hunger, when famine devastated their area. One act of kindness, one man who chose not to be afraid, and you can watch what God can do. Can we be that person this morning? Can we be those who sees the immigrant, who sees the marginalized, who sees those who are vulnerable as potential blessings, as those destiny changers God is sending in the midst of us? Can we be those who look at every human being as the blessing God is sending in the midst of us? Here is one thing I find in common between Joseph and my grandfather, Mazela Noah. Before Joseph died, he is instructing his brothers to remember and to be strong. Not to remember every bad thing they do. He's saying to them, what you did wrong, God has turned it and intended to be good for me. But also making sure that they go and do the same good to others. My grandfather, before he died, he sent word to his children. By the way, there is a long story we can keep for another day. My mother was born there, and at 2 years old, her mother died. So I don't know the picture of my grandfather. All these people I'm telling you, I know the names. I've never seen them. I don't know how they looked like. So my mother's mom died when she was 2. A missionary from Indiana took my mother in to raise her as an orphan. For 6 years, she was raised in that house. I had the privilege to meet the family of that missionary right here in Bern, Indiana. At age 8, my grandfather died. It was through civil war. For 5 years, there was civil war in that area. The missionary left, and my mother was given back to her family. During that civil war time, that's when my grandfather will die. But before he died, he sent word to his children and spoke a dream over them. This was passed, of course, through people to tell my uncles and others. My grandfather said, "One of you must follow the way of the missionaries. One of you must go to other lands, preach the gospel, and show kindness to the strangers you meet there." Do you understand why my grandfather will say this word? He came from a far, far land, and others showed him kindness. And he said, the only thing I can do is tell my children never to forget that they are strangers, they were immigrants. And they need to follow his example to go back to other places. Like these missionaries came Perhaps also like Ndunge went that far and bought someone and raised. Unfortunately, none of my uncles, neither my mom have had the opportunity to go to a far land and return the kindness. But that old man's dream, that old man's instructions have shown resilience through storms and trying to find other places to live. I find myself in South Africa. And for many evenings, many nights, I've been hearing my grandfather's words, tell others about the kindness of the missionaries. Speak the good news of Christ. Six years ago, 7 now, I decided to take full-time pastorate ministry in response to what my grandfather instructed his family. And God has a big sense of humor. God doesn't send us to Texas or to China or elsewhere. God sent us to Indiana, a place perhaps I didn't hear growing up. God sent us to Indiana to come and return the kindness of those who showed kindness to my grandfather. Brothers and sisters, we may be here this morning. There's someone in whose life we can make a difference. When we go out today, look around the neighborhood, those immigrants who you see, those people who may seem to have no value, try and touch their lives. God bless you.
Thank you for sharing that much of your story with us. It was very inspiring. Our response hymn is number 409, For We Are Strangers No More. Would you please stand and body your spirit?